"You're nothing but the help, you don't belong here," Vivian hissed, yanking the microphone from Eliza's trembling hands as champagne dripped from her simple dress. The wedding guests gasped collectively, phones recording as the bride publicly humiliated the catering assistant. What no one knew, not even the groom, was that the diamond bracelet Eliza wore beneath her sleeve contained a DNA sample that would prove she was Jonathan Reynolds' biological daughter, missing for 23 years after a hospital mix-up that had haunted the billionaire every day of his life. Jonathan froze mid-conversation across the ballroom, his attention caught by something familiar in the young woman's eyes as she stood mortified before his new wife. Those eyes, his mother's eyes, stared back at him from a face he'd never seen but somehow recognized in his soul. The weight of possibility crushed his chest as security began escorting the girl out. If she truly was his daughter, he was about to lose her again, this time watching her walk away with his own eyes. Meanwhile, Vivian's smirk revealed she knew more than she was letting on, much more. Eliza had only taken the catering job to get close to the Reynolds family after discovering her adoption papers 3 months ago. The truth had shattered her world. Her biological father wasn't dead as she'd been told, but was instead one of the wealthiest men in the country. She'd planned to approach him privately after the reception, but Vivian had deliberately spilled wine on her when she noticed Eliza staring too long at family photos. Now, as security gripped her arms, Eliza wondered if she'd ever get the chance to know the father she'd spent her whole life missing. "Wait," Jonathan called, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Something about the girl's wrist caught his eye, a flash of gold beneath her sleeve. His heart thundered against his ribs. Could it be? The bracelet he'd placed on his newborn daughter's wrist 23 years ago had a distinctive charm, a tiny glass slipper his late wife had chosen. The same charm he'd been searching for since the day his baby disappeared from the hospital nursery. The security guards paused, uncertain, as Jonathan crossed the room with purposeful strides. Vivian's smile faltered. "Darling, she's just a server who dropped an entire tray. Let security handle this so we can continue our celebration." But Jonathan wasn't listening. He reached for Eliza's wrist, gently pushing back her sleeve to reveal the bracelet that had haunted his dreams for decades. The tiny glass slipper charm glinted under the chandelier light. His eyes met Eliza's. The same shade of amber as his mother's, and something ancient and primal stirred in his chest. Recognition. "Where did you get this?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the confused murmurs of guests. "It was with me when I was adopted," Eliza replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My parents said it was the only thing I had from my biological family." Vivian stepped between them, her wedding gown rustling like angry whispers. "Jonathan, you're making a scene at our wedding. This girl is obviously trying to con you." "My daughter had a birthmark," Jonathan interrupted, his eyes never leaving Eliza's face. "A small crescent moon behind her right ear." The room fell silent as Eliza slowly turned her head and lifted her hair. There, exactly where Jonathan described, was a crescent-shaped birthmark. Vivian's champagne glass shattered against the marble floor. "I've been looking for you for 23 years, Jonathan said, his voice breaking. "Every private investigator, every lead, every hospital record." "I know," Eliza whispered. "I found the newspaper articles. That's how I found you." Vivian's face contorted with rage. "This is absurd. You can't possibly believe this. This nobody is your long-lost daughter. On our wedding day, no less." But the resemblance was undeniable. Guests began whispering, pointing between Jonathan and Eliza, noting the identical shape of their eyes, the same determined set of their jaws. "I have the DNA test results," Eliza said, reaching into her pocket with shaking hands. "I had it done privately last month. I just wanted to know my father before approaching you." Jonathan took the folded paper, his vision blurring as he read the 99.9% match confirmation. His new bride's face drained of color as she realized what was happening. "You knew," Jonathan said suddenly, turning to Vivian with dawning horror. That's why you were so cruel to her. You recognized her somehow. Vivian's silence was damning. The wedding guests watched in stunned silence as the bride's perfect mask began to crack. I found your search history, Vivian finally admitted, her voice cold. You've been obsessed with finding your daughter for years. When the catering company sent her photo in the staff lineup and I saw the resemblance, I did some digging. Jonathan stepped back as though physically struck. You knew my daughter was here, serving at our wedding, and you deliberately humiliated her? I've worked too hard to secure my place in your life, Vivian hissed, dropping all pretense. I wasn't about to let some long-lost daughter appear and threaten my position. Do you know what your company's shares are worth? What I've endured to get here? The guests' phones captured every word as Vivian's true nature revealed itself. Jonathan looked at the woman he'd married just hours earlier as though seeing her for the first time, a stranger wearing a beautiful mask that had finally slipped. Security, Jonathan said quietly, please escort my wife, no, Ms. Harlow, from the premises. Our lawyers will be in touch regarding annulment proceedings. As Vivian was led away, screaming threats about prenuptial agreements and revenge, Jonathan turned back to Eliza. 23 years of searching, of birthday candles blown out with the same wish, of Christmas mornings with gifts bought for a child who never came home, all of it culminated in this moment. I don't know what to say, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. I've imagined finding you so many times, but never like this. Eliza smiled through her tears. I practiced what I'd say too. None of it seems right now. Jonathan hesitated only a moment before opening his arms. Eliza stepped into her father's embrace for the first time since she was a newborn, and the wedding guests erupted in applause and tears. Welcome home, Jonathan whispered against her hair. 6 months later, Eliza stood nervously in the foyer of the Reynolds estate, adjusting her gown for the charity gala her father was hosting. The past months had been a whirlwind of DNA confirmations, legal proceedings against Vivian, who had indeed known about Eliza for weeks before the wedding, and the emotional process of building a relationship with the father she'd never known. You look just like your mother, Jonathan said, appearing at the bottom of the staircase in his tuxedo. She would have been so proud of you. Eliza smiled, touching the glass slipper charm on her wrist. Tell me about her again. As Jonathan began recounting stories of his first wife, Eliza's mother, neither noticed the elegant woman watching from the shadows of the garden, her eyes fixed on the security panel by the door. Vivian had changed her appearance, but not her determination. Tonight, she would reclaim what she believed was rightfully hers, no matter the cost. The gala was in full swing when the lights suddenly cut out. Screams erupted as the emergency generators failed to activate. In the darkness, Eliza felt someone grab her arm, pulling her toward a side exit. Dad, she called, but the grip tightened painfully. Not quite, Vivian's voice hissed in her ear as something cold pressed against her ribs. Move quietly or this knife finds a new home. Eliza's heart hammered as she was forced through the dark hallways of her newfound home. Her mind raced, she'd only just found her father, her true family. She couldn't lose everything now. Why are you doing this? Eliza whispered as they approached the service entrance. Because he was mine until you showed up, Vivian snarled. Everything was perfect. Do you know how long I worked to position myself in his life? How carefully I planned every detail. As they reached the door, Eliza made a split-second decision. The self-defense classes her adoptive father had insisted upon might finally prove useful. She stumbled deliberately, throwing Vivian off balance, then twisted away from the knife. The struggle was brief but violent. When the emergency lights finally flickered on, security found them on the floor, Eliza pressing Vivian's own knife against her throat, her hands steady despite her racing heart. You're just like him, Vivian spat as security pulled her away. Too stubborn to know when you're beaten. Eliza watched as her would-be kidnapper was led away in handcuffs. "No," she said quietly. "I'm like my mother too. Dad says she never gave up on anything she believed in." 1 year later, Eliza stood beside her father at the opening of the Reynolds Family Foundation for Missing Children. The organization, funded by Jonathan's billions, would help reunite families separated by hospital errors, disasters, and other circumstances. "I never thought finding you would lead to helping so many others," Jonathan said, squeezing his daughter's hand as they cut the ceremonial ribbon together. Eliza smiled up at him. Sometimes the most painful chapters of our lives become the most meaningful when we use them to help others write better endings to their own stories. As cameras flashed around them, Eliza realized how far she'd come from that humiliated catering assistant at a doomed wedding. Her journey, from abandoned baby to adopted child to lost daughter to found heiress, had transformed not just her life, but the lives of countless others through their foundation's work. "If our story has touched you," Jonathan said to the assembled press, "we hope you'll share it with others who might need to hear that hope is never truly lost, even after decades of searching." Eliza nodded, adding, "And remember that family isn't always about blood, it's about love. I was blessed with 2 fathers who loved me, one who raised me, and one who never stopped looking for me." As they walked away from the podium together, Eliza knew their story would continue inspiring others long after the cameras stopped rolling, a reminder that sometimes, the most beautiful beginnings arise from the most painful endings, and that true love, whether between parent and child or between soulmates, never truly gives up.